In today's video, I'm going to show you how to add additional diffusion to your softbox so that you can create really sexy, subtle, soft, gauzy, beautiful, soft light. So let's get started. Welcome back, everyone. If you could please like and subscribe, I would really appreciate it. And another thing that I really appreciate is when making videos for this channel helps me improve my skills. And so to give you a little bit of background, I've been using lights for over 20 years. And there's a lot of things that I've learned from other photographers, or maybe I learned it long ago and maybe I read something, or who knows. But I made an assumption long ago that I thought XYZ was true. That's what I read, that's what I was told, that sort of thing. So in order to make these videos, a lot of times what I will do is I will fact check certain things, either through demonstrating or Googling and that sort of thing, and just to make sure that I have things correct. And so the experiment that I conducted for this video today, in order to demonstrate for you this concept, actually helped me improve my skills. And so if you wait for the very end of the video, that's what you'll see. And just so you know, I'm not doing that so it's sort of like a but wait, there's more sort of thing. I'm going to run you through the experiments that I ran for this video in order, and sort of what I learned along the way and sort of how I designed it, and that's how I ended up at the position where I taught myself how to better use diffusion in order to create really soft and subtle light. So for this first shoot that I did, or first look that I did with our model Daniel, I had him pose in front of a window and I exposed for outside, but the light inside was very dark in comparison. And so I started off with my Elinchrom Light Motive 120 here off to the side in this sort of classic Rembrandt position. And then I added, if you can believe it, the thickest opaque shower curtain, heavy dutyest one that they have at Home Depot, something that costs only $15. And so I clipped it to the front of the softbox, and now as you can see here in this side-by-side with the raw softbox on the left and with the diffusion image on the right, or the diffused image on the right, you can see that there are very subtle differences. And if you're having difficulty right now discerning the differences, that's because they really aren't that easy to see. So if we zoom in here to 100%, you'll notice that this image on the left with the raw softbox, if you will, is fairly, it is soft because it's soft light. But then if you look at the diffusion image, you'll see that the contrast is just a little bit lower and those details are just a little more subdued. Now I intended to use a 6 by 6 foot or 180 centimeter by 180 centimeter Westcott Scrim gym on this setup too, but it turns out I didn't leave enough room on the set for me to use it, so that'll have to wait for our next demonstration. So this time I had Daniel pose in front of this green backdrop and I left room for the Scrim gym this time. So now that what we're going to look at is we're going to look at the softbox all by itself. Then we're going to look at it here in the middle with the diffusion, the shower curtain, if you will. And then we'll look at it over here on the far right with the Westcott Scrim gym. And I'm using 2 layers of their 3/4 stop Scrim together on the Scrim gym, and that's because it's very translucent on its own, and I have 2 of them, so I figured we might as well use more power, if you will, in order to get a more extreme output. And you can see here by looking at the full body image that the light is fairly directional, or it's more directional with the softbox, and it's a little more diffuse with the diffusion, and that floor, or the gradient from the top to the bottom, is just a little bit larger. And then as we look at the details here on his face at 100%, you can see that the shower curtain image is a little softer and a little gauzier feeling. And then you can see over here on the right that with the Scrim gym, it is even more subtle and better looking. So after I sat down and looked at all of the images from my shoot with Daniel, I started to wonder why it was that I didn't see a big difference. Because on previous shoots where I added additional diffusion to a softbox, I saw a huge difference. Like on this one during a workshop that I was teaching in Phoenix. Here it is without any diffusion on this 150 centimeter Elinchrom indirect octa. Here it is with one layer of diffusion, and here it is with 2 layers of diffusion. And you can see right away that there is a big difference in the results. And I was just using sheer curtains on this particular shoot. So I started to think of how I could design another experiment in order to see if I could get different results. So on my shoot with Daniel, I started to wonder if the images were affected by the fact that he was wearing makeup. Now, this isn't surprising that Daniel is wearing makeup. In fact, on almost all of my shoots with male and female and non-binary subjects, I will use makeup. And a lot of times with men and non-binary folks, I am using just simple powder, and it's there to knock down the shine on their skin. If you're interested in checking that out, I actually have a video that's called Basic Makeup Tips for Male Models, and I'll link to it below. And in there, I go over my process for that. So one thing that using makeup does is it knocks down the shine, and it also evens out their skin tone. And one of the things that happens when you're using additional diffusion is that the light becomes less reflective. In fact, there's a couple of things we need to keep in mind during this test. So there are some basic principles. So not only does makeup make the skin less reflective, the harder light sources make skin more reflective, and softer light sources make them less shiny. And so that's why we should see a difference between the raw softbox and the image with the diffusion. But we didn't see much of a difference with these images with Daniel. The other thing to keep in mind is that when a light is larger relative to the subject, how much of their field of view does it take up, the softer it will be. So the larger it is in their field of view, the softer the light will be. So that doesn't mean that a 7-foot light source is equally soft at 7 feet and 20 feet. It just means that it's very soft at 7 feet, and it will be softer at 7 feet than a 3-foot softbox at 7 feet. So just keep that in mind. So I wanted to devise a new experiment for a new test shoot. But before I go into that, I just wanted to let you know that if you're interested in learning from me more, I have an online learning platform called the Academy with John Gress. And on the Academy, you'll get access to exclusive longer format tutorials than what you'll find here on YouTube. You'll also get access to 2 monthly live Q&A and critique sessions, and you'll get access to a exclusive Facebook group, discounts on my in-person workshops, and more. So for more information, just go to johngress.com/academy. Also, if you sign up, there's a 3-day free trial, so you can check out the hours of exclusive content with no obligation whatsoever. So now let's move on, and we'll talk about that second experiment that I did. So I decided that I would test out whether or not having makeup made a difference. So I decided to do a test with our model Ethereal with no makeup. And then I decided to test out whether or not having the main light directly on the diffusion or maybe a little further back from the diffusion makes a difference. So if we can create a little pocket of air. So I needed to create an A and B test, if you will, one where it's close and one where it's further away. So for my first test, I placed the light 1 meter from the subject. And for those of you who are my fellow Americans, don't think I'm trying to sound sophisticated. I used a 40-inch grip arm to determine the distance between the modifier face and his face, and that's where I came up with 1 meter, because 40 inches is basically 1 meter. So I was using my Elinchrom Light Motive 120. It's a 120 centimeter or 4-foot softbox with 16 sides on it. I then had a grid on there. The reason why I was using the grid is because I wanted the light to be more focused and not bounce around the room, just in case that was affecting the results. And that's going to become more of a big deal when we move the light further back. So on this test, I used the light or the softbox all by itself. That's where I started. Then I added the shower curtain. Then I added a new diffusion option, and that is this gel that I have from Rosco. It's a diffusion gel material, and it looks very similar to the shower curtain, only it is actually photo gear or video gear. It's not a DIY approach. And then of course I use the double diffused Scrim gem. And as we look at the 4 images up here on the screen, you can see that at full body there's a difference in the spread of the light when it comes to how much light is hitting the floor. And that's because that diffusion material is causing the light to scatter, whereas it was very focused with the raw softbox. And now as we zoom in here to 100%, you can see that there is a fair amount of difference in the reflectivity of the skin on his cheek here, that highlight right below his eye. You can see that with the shower curtain liner and the diffusion material, that those highlights are knocked down a little bit and they're smoother, but you can see that things are really a lot softer over here with the double diffused Westcott Scrim gem. And so you can take away from this test that there is possibly a difference in the makeup with the softness, but you can clearly see that as we progress here into more and more diffusion, that there is more and more of a difference. And maybe there wasn't much of a difference between the shower curtain liner and the diffusion gel because the two of them look pretty much the same. So for this next test, I got out my fancy 40-inch grip arm, my 1 meter grip arm, and I started to measure so that I had my light 2 meters back from the model. And then I put my diffusion material right there, or at least I made a mark, if you will, using this Apple box to figure out where 1 meter was from him and 1 meter was from the light source. And so for this very first test, I just used the raw softbox. And then of course I added in the shower curtain liner, then the diffusion material, and then finally the Westcott Scrim gem. And as we look at these images full body, you can see that there is a difference in how diffuse the light is near the bottom of the frame. And one thing that I need to mention, I sat in his position and I looked at the diffusion material and I made sure that he could not see the raw light. What I forgot to do or didn't think of was to lay on the floor and look at it from his feet, the perspective of his feet, and see if his feet were able to see a direct line of sight, if you will, to the softbox without any diffusion on it. So just take these full-length results with a grain of salt. So looking at them full length, you can see that there is a difference in how diffuse the light is. And then as we move in here to the close-up, you can see, perhaps for the first time, that there is a stark difference between the softness of the images as we go from the raw softbox over here to the double diffused image. So one other thing that I should mention in order to sort of interpret these results is remember back to when I said that when the light source is larger relative to the subject, the softer it will be. And so when I moved my light back 2 meters and I illuminated the diffusion material, at least with the case of the shower curtain and the Scrim gem, I increased the size of my light source. Now the reason for that is the diffusion material is only 4 feet or 1.2 meters wide, so when my light hit it, it wasn't bigger. But the shower curtain is wider than 1.2 meters, and when I hit it with the light, I had a larger effective light source. And the same thing is true for when I was using the Scrim gem. When I moved the light back, more of that surface area was covered with the light. And you can see in the final results there is a big difference. And when you look at the images here on the top with the light 1 meter from the subject, and when you look at the results here on the bottom with the light 2 meters from the subject, you can see that moving it back there and having that gap between the subject's face, the diffusion, and then a gap between the diffusion and the softbox made a big difference. So if you think about the design of a softbox, you've got a light in the back, and then you've got a gap of air. You've got a diffuser usually, some more gap, more air, and then another diffuser. So that idea that there should be a distance between the diffusion and the light is already can be seen in the examples of the softboxes. We've just added another layer of diffusion to it with the gap of air there. So my main takeaway from this whole experiment with Daniel and with Ethereum is that in the future what I'm going to do is I'm going to get my diffusion in there as close as I can to the subject. This is what I'm going to do when I really want soft, beautiful, sexy, gauzy diffused light. I'm going to get that light in there as close as I can to the subject. And the reason for that is, remember, the larger the light source is relative to the subject, the softer it will be. So I'm going to get it in there as close as I can. And then I'm going to move my light source back enough so that it can cover the entire diameter of the scrim gem, side to side and top to bottom. And that way I will have effectively a larger, softer light source, and that diffusion will really do its work. Now, last summer I did a shoot similar to this, and I had my light back a fair distance, and then I also added in a 8x8 butterfly diffusion material frame, an 8x8 frame with advantage gripware on the front of it. And then I got ridiculously soft light on my subjects here, Kenny and Justin. Now the other thing to keep in mind is that I used V-flats and flags in order to control where the light was going so that the light didn't end up on the background or on the floor, but they could still see the entire surface of the scrim from their point of view. So going forward, that's how I'm going to use diffusion on my shoots. I hope this was helpful and made sense. If you have any questions or comments, just leave that below. And as always, stay safe, enjoy the holiday season, Merry Christmas, all of that good stuff, and I will see you soon.